Hello everybody. I am here and oh look, my microphone's working. Welcome. I'm just doing a little bit of minor editing to my overlay. I was trying to get it done earlier, but busy day, you know how things are. Formal Friday, tiara, blouse, whatever. Thankfully my top is not green enough to disappear into the library in the background because I'm green screening. So, what was I going to tell you? I don't know. Oh, I was in the middle of doing my overlays. I found a bigger image of the book cover, which is up there for you. Thank you. We are reading currently The Railway Children by Edith Nesbit. And it was written in the very early 1910s or 20s. I can't remember quite which, actually. I'm sorry about that. But it was written and we are enjoying it. We've had 2 chapters so far, and the chapters are quite long, the ones we've had. I'm just going to open up Twitch on my phone so I can see what's happening with chat outside of just what's on my screen in front of me. Sorry about that. And it sounds like my voice still isn't quite up to what it usually is, so I'll try not to shout too much. And make sure the sound is turned down on my phone. Yes, we have a recording over on YouTube of me reading, and you can hear me reading in the background of me reading, but it's a few minutes behind the background one is. I think because I had my phone listening but didn't actually have the volume turned off. Oops. It's not too loud, so that's okay. We'll get there. So yeah, I am going to say, what am I going to say? I'm just going to type something for somebody somewhere else. So how has your week been? Has it been a good week? I still haven't found the googly eyes to put on my webcam. Not It's got nothing to do with so whatever, doesn't matter. Stream elements, here we go. Here's my overlays. For some reason the browser window had to restart itself. So thankfully, I think it kept the edit that I did before with the new image, and I'm about to put the new image up here for you, which is a little bit bigger so you can see it a bit more clearly. And then we will start reading. So before we start reading, have you got your drink of water with you? Have you got something to snack on? And have you got somewhere comfortable to sit or lie down and listen? I'm more than happy for you to be technically lurking, just sitting or lying there listening. You don't have to be watching, you don't have to be commenting in chat. I don't talk usually while I'm reading, except for maybe to explain a little bit of something that's in the text of what I'm reading, because it's a bedtime story. I mean, hey, and we're saving the bedtime stories, the recordings, so that we can actually listen to them again elsewhere or on the day. There it is. I'm just trying to actually see where it is. It wasn't showing me the information I was expecting to see. And this should be a little bit quicker now because I actually have the image uploaded. I'm drinking the last of my coffee for today. What's your favourite drink? Do you drink things other than water? If it's something too naughty, you don't have to mention it, by the way. Come on. So I think my computer's on a go slow. Oh dear. My antivirus wants me to restart. OBS is telling me I'm live. This is on the notifications. And I'm looking to see if the backup thingy on my computer is running, but it's not at the moment. Yay. let's see if this image will resize for me, because if it will resize, then you'll be able to see. Oh, come on. You're being funny now. You'll be able to see a better picture of the cover. It's so sluggish. I really have to get my office sorted out so that there's another computer I can use, so that I can use the other computer. There you go. It's over the edge of the picture, the chat box. That doesn't matter. And here it comes. Coming now. There you go. Right, so that is sorted. We shall now, nearly ready to read. Quick, run off, go to the loo while you're waiting. I'm about to start reading, so you better have been off to the loo and done whatever you need to do and got your snacks and drinks ready, because I am not going to. Oh, sorry, Forrest. Sorry, it's because you wrote all caps that the chatbot actually filtered out what you were saying. Sorry about that. Hi, good to see you. I'm so glad you could get here. Oh, what am I doing here? This is just... I really do need to get this computer replaced with the other one, because then it should work properly. So, yeah. Thank you. I understand. I totally understand. I need to actually go through and fix up the bot filter system that I'm using. I've got, it's fairly stringent for words, because as read aloud stories, I'm very aware that there are people who want to have their children be allowed to listen, and a lot of the children are actually quite young. I know this from past experience with things that people have said to me, and so I want them to have their guardians, their parents and whoever else they're with, maybe grandparents, not mind putting them in front of the monitor to listen. And so therefore I've got it filtering fairly strictly for some things, but there are other things which it just automatically filters, which I can adjust, but I just hadn't realised I needed to adjust. One of the ones was too many exclamation marks. I use lots of exclamation marks when I type, and I hadn't realised it was actually filtering out what somebody was saying to me one time, because they had put more than one or two exclamation marks at the end of what they were saying. So hopefully I will remember to get this sorted out. Same with capitals. It's actually quite a standard bot filter system for chats, where they will just drop any comments that are all in caps, unfortunately. And I don't have a problem with people typing all in caps. I just have to remember to change that filter setting. So anyway, we are getting there. My other monitor is now actually showing what it's meant to. I think, yes, it's coming. Here it is. So great to have you here. Hopefully Nikki is able to be listening while she's crafting her paper art. Another friend of mine who's an artist who actually she's actually doing a series. It's part of a course where she's creating handmade books out of various materials, and I know she's working on a project at the moment, and she often will have me reading in the background while she's working. So it's a lovely way to actually just have some company without having to be too intensely involved with the words that are going on. So we shall start reading. I shall stop yakking on. My iPad is working. I'm so excited. I had it thank you, Rooster. Thank you for coming in. It's so good to see you here. Fabulous that you could come, and you made it in time. I'm just about to start reading. My iPad today decided it wanted me to sign in again, because I thought it's been so long since I've turned it off and on again, I better do it. But when I turned it back on again, it was asking me to sign in, so I went to sign in, and then it said, sign in. And then it said, please choose a network. Yes, I know. Thank you, son. Yes, I shall do. Please choose a network. And I chose a network and nothing happened, and it just sat there and it was telling me it was going to set up my iPad, and I'm thinking like, oh no, I need it for reading. So I plugged it in because I thought maybe its charge is a little bit low. And then decided I'd open iTunes and just see what was on my computer and see what was going on there. And that actually said, your iPad needs to do some stuff. So would you like to sign in? Please put in your password. And it's working. The key thing is it's working. Anyway, so I'll get on with reading instead of yakking. We are reading The Railway Children by Edith Nesbit, and we are reading Chapter 3, The Old Gentleman. Now, the chapters in here are quite long, so I'm not quite sure how many I'm going to manage today, but we'll see how we go. Sorry about that. The Old Gentleman, Chapter 3. After the adventure of Peter's coal mine, it seemed well to the children to keep away from the station. But they could not keep away from the railway. They had lived all their lives in a street where cabs and omnibuses, we would now call them buses, they used to be called omnibuses, rumbled by at all hours, and the carts of butchers and bakers and candlestick makers, I never saw a candlestick maker's cart, did you, might occur at any moment. Here, in the deep silence of the sleeping country, the only things that went by were the trains. They seemed to be all that was left to link the children to the old life that had once been theirs. Straight down the hill in front of Three Chimneys, that's the name of the house, the daily passage of their 6 feet began to mark a path across the crisp, short turf. It's a paddock that the house is set in, so it's been grazed down. Thank you for coming. Good to have you here. I'm going to apologise up front now for those of you who are new here. I am not going to be commenting on what's in chat until I get to the end of a chapter. You can chat amongst yourselves, that's great. Please try not to be rude because there might be little children listening. That's part of what this is all for. But do chat to each other if you want to. So they began to know the hours when certain trains passed, and they gave names to them. The 9:15 up, that means towards the city, was called the Green Dragon. The 10:07 down was the Worm of Wantley. The Midnight Town Express, whose shrieking rush they sometimes woke from their dreams to hear, was the fearsome Fly-by-Night. Peter got up once in chill starshine, and peeping at it through his curtains, named it on the spot. It was by the Green Dragon that the old gentleman travelled. He was a very nice-looking old gentleman, and he looked as if he were nice too, which was not at all the same thing. He had a fresh-coloured, clean-shaven face and white hair, and he wore rather odd-shaped collars and a top hat that wasn't exactly the same kind as other people's. Of course, the children didn't see all this at first. In fact, the first thing they noticed about the old gentleman was his hand. It was one morning as they sat on the fence, waiting for the Green Dragon, which was 3¼ minutes late by Peter's Waterbury watch, that he had given him on his last birthday. "The Green Dragon's going where Father is," said Phyllis. "If it were really a real dragon, we could stop it and ask it to take our love to Father." "Dragons don't carry people's love," said Peter. "They'd be above it." "Yes, they do, if you tame them thoroughly first. They fetch and carry like pet spaniels," said Phyllis, "and feed out of your hand." "I wonder why Father never writes to us." "Mother says he's too busy," said Bobby, "but he'll write soon, she says." "I say," Phyllis suggested, "let's all wave to the green dragon as it goes by. If it's a magic dragon, it'll understand and take our love to Father. And if it isn't, 3 waves aren't much. We'll never miss them." So when the Green Dragon tore shrieking out of the mouth of its dark lair, which was the tunnel, all 3 children stood on the railing and waved their pocket handkerchiefs without stopping to think whether they were clean handkerchiefs or the reverse. They were, as a matter of fact, very much the reverse. And out of a first-class carriage a hand waved back. A quite clean hand. It held a newspaper. It was the old gentleman's hand. After this it became the custom for waves to be exchanged between the children and the 9:15, and the children, especially the girls, liked to think that perhaps the old gentleman knew father and would meet him in business, wherever that shady retreat might be, and tell him how his 3 children stood on a rail far away in the green country and waved their love to him every morning, wet or fine. For they were now able to go out in all sorts of weather such as they would never have been allowed to go out in when they lived in their villa house. This was Aunt Emma's doing, and the children felt more and more that they had not been quite fair to this unattractive aunt, when they found how useful were the long gaiters and waterproof coats that they had laughed at her for buying for them. Mother, all this time, was very busy with her writing. She used to send off a good many long blue envelopes with stories in them, and large envelopes of different sizes and colours used to come to her. Sometimes she would sigh when she opened them and say, "Another story come home to roost. Oh dear, and then the children would be very sorry. But sometimes she would wave the envelope in the air and say, "Hooray, hooray! Here's a sensible editor. He's taken my story, and this is the proof of it." At first the children thought the proof meant the letter the sensible editor had written, but they presently got to know that the proof was long slips of paper with the story printed on them. Whenever an editor was sensible, there were buns for tea. One day Peter was going down to the village to get buns to celebrate the sensibleness of the editor of the Children's Globe when he met the station master. Peter felt very uncomfortable, for he had now had time to think over the affair of the coal mine. He did not like to say good morning to the station master, as you usually do to anyone you meet on a lonely road, because he had a hot feeling which spread even to his ears that the station master might not care to speak to a person who had stolen coals. Stolen is a nasty word, but Peter felt it was the right one, so he looked down and said nothing. It was the station master who said good morning as he passed by, and Peter answered, "Good morning," and then he thought, "Perhaps he doesn't know who I am by daylight, or he wouldn't be so polite." And he did not like the feeling which thinking this gave him. And then, before he knew what he was going to do, he ran after the station master, who stopped when he heard Peter's hasty boots crunching the road, and coming up with him very breathless, and with his ears now quite magenta-coloured, because he's feeling embarrassed, he said, "I don't want you to be polite to me if you don't know me when you see me." "Eh?" said the station master. "I thought perhaps you didn't know it was me that took the coals," Peter went on, "when you said good morning. But it was, and I'm sorry. There." "Why," said the station master, "I wasn't thinking anything at all about the precious coals. Let bygones be bygones. And where were you off to in such a hurry?" "I'm going to buy buns for tea," said Peter. "I thought you were all so poor," said the station master. "So we are," said Peter confidentially, "but we always have 3 pennyworth of halfpennies," that's a certain size bun, "for tea whenever mother sells a story or a poem or anything." "Oh," said the station master, "so your mother writes stories, does she?" "The beautifulest you ever read," said Peter. "You ought to be very proud to have such a clever mother." "Yes," said Peter, "but she used to play with us more before she had to be so clever." "Well," said the station master, "I must be getting along. You give us a look in at the station whenever you feel so inclined, and as to coals, it's a word that, well, oh, no, we never mention it, eh?" "Thank you," said Peter. "I'm very glad it's all straightened out between us." And he went on across the canal bridge to the village to get the buns, feeling more comfortable in his mind than he had felt since the hand of the station master had fastened on his collar that night among the coals. Next day, when they had sent the 3-fold wave of greeting to father by the green dragon, and the old gentleman had waved back as usual, Peter proudly led the way to the station. "But ought we?" said Bobby. "After the coals, she means," Phyllis explained. "I met the station master yesterday," said Peter in an offhand way, and he pretended not to hear what Phyllis had said. "He especially invited us to go down any time we like." After the coals, repeated Phyllis. Stop a minute. My bootlace is undone again. It always is undone again, said Peter, and the station master was more of a gentleman than you'll ever be, Phil, throwing a coal at a chap's head like that. Phyllis did up her bootlace and went on in silence. But her shoulders shook, and presently a fat tear fell off her nose and splashed on the metal of the railway line. Bobby saw it. "Why, what's the matter, darling?" she said, stopping short and putting her arm around the heaving shoulders. "He called me ungentlemanly," sobbed Phyllis. "I didn't never call him unladylike, not even when he tied my Clorinda to the firewood bundle and burnt her at the stake for a martyr." Peter had indeed perpetrated this outrage a year or two before. "Well, you began, you know," said Bobby honestly, "about the coals and all that. Don't you think you'd better both unsay everything since the wave and let honour be satisfied?" "I will if Peter will," said Phyllis, snuffling. "All right," said Peter. "Honour is satisfied. Here, use my hanky, Phil, for goodness sake, if you've lost yours as usual. I wonder what you'd do with them." "You had my last one," said Phyllis indignantly, "to tie up the rabbit hutch door with. But you're very ungrateful. It's quite right what it says in the poetry book about sharper than serpent it is to have a toothless child, but it means ungrateful when it says toothless. Miss Lowe told me so." "All right," said Peter impatiently. "I'm sorry. There, now, will you come on?" They reached the station and spent a joyous 2 hours with the porter. He was a worthy man and seemed never tired of answering the questions that began with why, which so many people in higher ranks of life often seem to weary of. He told them many things that they had not known before, as, for instance, that the things that hook carriages together are called couplings, and the pipes like great serpents that hang over the couplings are meant to stop the train with. If you could get a hold of one of them, when the train is going, and pull 'em apart, said he, she'd stop dead off with a jerk. "Who's she?" said Phyllis. "The train, of course," said the porter. After that the train was never again it to the children. "And you know the thing in the carriages where it says on it £5 fine for improper use? If you was to improperly use that, the train'd stop." "And if you used it properly?" said Roberta. "It'd stop, just the same, I suppose," said he, "but it isn't proper to use unless you're being murdered. There was an old lady once, someone kidded her on, it was a refreshment room bell, and she used it improper, not being in danger of her life, though hungry, and when the train stopped and the guard came along expecting to find someone weltering in their last moments, she says, 'Oh, please, mister, I'll take a glass of stout and a bath bun,' she says. And the train was 7 minutes behind her time as it was." "What did the guard say to the old lady?" "I don't know," replied the porter, "but I lay she didn't forget it in a hurry, whatever it was." In such delightful conversation the time went by all too quickly. The station master came out once or twice from the sacred inner temple behind the place where the hole is that they sell you tickets through, and it was most jolly with them all. "Just as if coal hadn't been discovered," Phyllis whispered to her sister. "He gave them each an orange and promised to take them up into the signal box one of these days when he wasn't so busy." Several trains went through the station, and Peter noticed for the first time that engines have numbers on them, like cabs. "Yes," said the porter, "I knowed a young gent as used to take down the numbers of every single one he seed in a green notebook with silver corners on it, owing to his father being very well-to-do in wholesale stationery." Peter felt that he could take down numbers too, even if he was not the son of a wholesale stationer. As he did not happen to have a green leather notebook with silver corners, the porter gave him a yellow envelope, and on it he noted 379 and 663, and felt that this was the beginning of what would be a most interesting collection. That night at tea he asked Mother if she had a green leather notebook with silver corners. She had not, but when she heard what he wanted it for, she gave him a little black one. "It has a few pages torn out," said she, "but it will hold quite a lot of numbers, and when it's full, I'll give you another. I'm so glad you like the railway. Only please, you mustn't walk on the line." "Not if we face the way the train's coming?" asked Peter, after a gloomy pause in which glances of despair were exchanged. "No, really not," said Mother. Then Phyllis said, "Mother, didn't you ever walk on the railway lines when you were little?" Mother was an honest and honourable mother, so she had to say yes. "Well then," said Phyllis, "but darlings, you don't know how fond I am of you. What should I do if you got hurt?" "Are you fonder of us than Granny was of you when you were little?" Phyllis asked. Bobby made signs to her to stop, but Phyllis never did see signs, no matter how plain they might be. Mother did not answer for a minute. She got up to put more water in the teapot. "No one," she said at last, "ever loved anyone more than my mother loved me." Then she was quiet again, and Bobby kicked Phyllis hard under the table because Bobby understood a little bit the thoughts that were making Mother so quiet. The thoughts of the time when Mother was a little girl and was all the world to her mother. It seems so easy and natural to run to Mother when one is in trouble. Bobby understood a little how people do not leave off running to their mothers when they are in trouble, even when they are grown up. And she thought she knew a little what it must be to be sad and have no mother to run to any more. So she kicked Phyllis, who said, "What are you kicking me like that for, Bob?" And then Mother laughed a little inside and said, "Very well then, only let me be sure you do know which way the trains come, and don't walk on the line near the tunnel or near corners." "Trains keep to the left, like carriages," said Peter, "so if we keep to the right, we're bound to see them coming. So it must be a twin-track line." "Very well," said Mother, "and I dare say you think that she ought not to have said it." But she remembered about when she was a little girl herself, and she did say it, and neither her own children, nor you, nor any other children in the world could ever understand exactly what it cost her to do it. Only some few of you, like Bobby, may understand a very little bit. I would say that Mother was possibly a little worried that something might happen to them. It was the very next day that Mother had to stay in bed because her head ached so. Sorry, I'm just going to move my chair. It's trying to roll backwards. I've got relatively new wheels on it and they work better than the old ones, and they don't wreck the floor, but they roll better, so therefore sometimes my chair tries to roll away from the camera and the microphone, and it doesn't work so well that way. Anyway, we'll carry on. It was the very next day that Mother had to stay in bed because her head ached so. Her hands were burning hot, and she would not eat anything, and her throat was very sore. "If I was you, Mum," as in ma'am, madam, said Mrs. Vinnie, "I should take and send for the doctor. There's a lot of catchy complaints going about just now. My sister's eldest, she took a chill and it went to her inside 2 years ago come Christmas, and she's never been the same girl since." Mother wouldn't at first, but in the evening she felt so much worse that Peter was sent to the house in the village that had 3 laburnum trees by the gate, and on the gate a brass plate with W.W. Forrest, that's with 2 R's in the middle, M.D. on it. W.W. Forrest, M.D. came at once. He talked to Peter on the way back. He seemed a most charming and sensible man, interested in railways and rabbits and really important things. When he had seen Mother, he said it was influenza. "Now, Lady Grave Airs," he said in the hall to Bobby, "I suppose you'll want to be head nurse." "Of course," said she. "Well then, I'll send down some medicine. Keep up a good fire, have some strong beef tea made ready to give her as soon as the fever goes down. She can have grapes now, and beef essence and soda water and milk, and you'd better get in a bottle of brandy, the best brandy. Cheap brandy is worse than poison." She asked him to write it all down, and he did. When Bobby showed Mother the list he had written, Mother laughed. It was a laugh, Bobby decided, though it was rather odd and feeble. Nonsense, said Mother, laying in bed with eyes as bright as beads. I can't afford all that rubbish. Tell Mrs. Vinnie to boil 2 pounds of scrag end of the neck for your dinners tomorrow, and I can have some of the broth. Yes, I should like some more water now, love, and will you get a basin and sponge my hands? That helps to bring the temperature down, so you feel a bit cooler. Roberta obeyed. When she had done everything she could to make Mother less uncomfortable, she went down to see the others. Her cheeks were very red, her lips set tight, and her eyes almost as bright as Mother's. She told them what the doctor had said and what Mother had said. And now, said she, when she'd told all, there is no one but us to do anything, and we've got to do it. I've got the shilling for the mutton, because the scrag end of the neck is a cut of mutton. We can do without the beastly mutton, said Peter. Bread and butter will support life. People have lived on less on desert islands many a time. Of course, said her sister, and Mrs. Vinnie was sent to the village to get as much brandy and soda water and beef tea as she could buy for a shilling. But even if we never have anything to eat at all, said Phyllis, you can't get all those other things with our dinner money. No, said Bobby, frowning. We must find out some other way. Now think, everybody, just as hard as ever you can. They did think, and presently they talked. And later, when Bobby had gone up to sit with Mother, in case she wanted anything, the other two were very busy with scissors and a white sheet and a paintbrush and the pot of Brunswick black that Mrs. Vinnie used for grates and fenders. That's like stove blacking. They did not manage to do what they wished exactly with the first sheet, so they took another out of the linen cupboard. It did not occur to them that they were spoiling good sheets, which cost money. They only knew that they were making a good, but what they were making comes later. Bobby's bed had been moved into Mother's room, and several times in the night she got up to mend the fire and to give her mother milk and soda water. Mother talked to herself a good deal, but it did not seem to mean anything. And once she woke up suddenly and called out, "Mama, Mama!" And Bobby knew she was calling for Granny, and that she had forgotten that it was no use calling for Granny because Granny was dead. So Mother is having hallucinations because she's got a fever. We often refer to them as fever dreams, where when you're asleep, you get pictures in your head that are just to do with things you remember, strange things, all sorts of stuff like that. The weirdest dreams you can get. In the early morning, Bobby heard her name and jumped out of bed and ran to Mother's bedside. Yes, I think I was asleep, said Mother. My poor little duck, how tired you'll be. I do hate to give you all this trouble. Trouble, said Bobby. Don't cry, sweet, Mother said. I shall be all right in a day or two. And Bobby said yes, and tried to smile. When you are used to 10 hours of solid sleep, to get up 3 or 4 times in your sleep time makes you feel as though you had been up all night. Bobby felt quite stupid, and her eyes were sore and stiff, but she tidied the room and arranged everything neatly before the doctor came. This was at 8:30. Everything going on all right, little nurse? He said at the front door. Did you get the brandy? I've got the brandy, said Bobby, in a little flat bottle. I didn't see the grapes or the beef tea, though, said he. No, said Bobby firmly, but you will tomorrow, and there's some beef stewing in the oven for beef tea. Who told you to do that? He asked. I noticed what Mother did when Phil had mumps. Right, said the doctor. Now you get your old woman to sit with your mother, that's the housekeeper, and then you eat a good breakfast and go straight to bed and sleep till dinner time. We can't afford to have a head nurse ill. Sorry. My nose is a bit blocked at the moment. He was really quite a nice doctor. When the 9:15 came out of the tunnel that morning, the old gentleman in the first-class carriage put down his newspaper and got ready to wave his hand to the 3 children on the fence. But this morning there were not 3. There was only one, and that was Peter. Peter was not on the railings either, as usual. He was standing in front of them in an attitude like that of a showman showing off the animals in a menagerie, or of the kind of clergyman who, when he points with a wand at scenes from Palestine, when there is a magic lantern, that slides, and he is explaining it, so talking about it, presenting it to them. This way, presenting it to them. Peter was pointing too, and what he was pointing at was a large white sheet nailed against the fence. On the sheet there were thick black letters, more than a foot long. Some of them had run a little because of Phyllis having put the Brunswick black on too eagerly, but the words were quite easy to read. And this is what the old gentleman and several other people in the train read in the large black letters on the white sheet. Look out at the station. A good many people did look out at the station and were disappointed, for they saw nothing unusual. The old gentleman looked out too, and at first he too saw nothing more unusual than the gravelled platform and the sunshine and the wallflowers and the forget-me-nots in the station borders. It was only just as the train was beginning to puff and pull itself together to start again that he saw Phyllis. She was quite out of breath with running. "Oh," she said, "I thought I'd missed you. My bootlaces would keep coming down, and I fell over them twice. Here, take it." She thrust a warm, dampish letter into his hand as the train moved. He leaned back in his corner and opened the letter. This is what he read. "Dear Mr. We do not know your name. Mother is ill and the doctor says to give her the things at the end of the letter, but she says she can't afford it and to get mutton for us, and she will have the broth. We do not know anybody here but you, because Father is away and we do not know the address. Father will pay you, or if he has lost all his money or anything, Peter will pay you when he is a man. We promise it on our honour, Honer. I owe you for all the things Mother wants. Signed, Peter, Sined. Will you give the parcel, Parsel, to the station master because of us not knowing what train you come down by, because they only see him in the mornings going up to the city. Say it is for Peter that was sorry about the coals, and he will know all right. Roberta, Phyllis, Peter. They signed at the bottom. Then came the list of things the doctor had ordered. The old gentleman read it through once, and his eyebrows went up. He read it twice and smiled a little. When he read it thrice, he put it in his pocket and went on reading his Times newspaper. At about 6 that evening there was a knock at the back door. The 3 children rushed to open it, and there stood the friendly porter, who had told them so many interesting things about railways. He dumped down a big hamper on the kitchen flags. That's the big stones that make the floor. "Old gent," he said, "he asked me to fetch it up straight away." "Thank you very much," said Peter, and then as the porter lingered he added, "I'm most awfully sorry I haven't got 2pence to give you like Father does, but—" "You drop it if you please," said the porter indignantly. "I wasn't thinking about no 2pences. I only wanted to say I was sorry about your mamma's wasn't so well, and to ask how she finds herself this evening, and I fetched her along a bit of sweetbriar. Very sweet to smell it is." "2pence indeed," said he, and produced a bunch of sweetbriar, which is flowers, wild rose flowers, from his hat. "Just like a conjurer," said Phyllis afterwards. I think that means it was in his hat. "Thank you very much," said Peter, "and I beg your pardon about the 2pence. "No offence," said the porter, untruly, but politely, as he went. Then the children undid the hamper. First there was straw, and then there were fine shavings. That's to protect everything in it. And then came all the things they had asked for, and plenty of them, and then a good many things they had not asked for, among others peaches and port wine, and 2 chickens, a cardboard box full of big red roses with long stalks, and a tall thin green bottle of lavender water, and 3 smaller fatter bottles of eau de cologne. There was a letter too. "Dear Roberta and Phyllis and Peter," it said, "here are the things you want. Your mother will want to know where they came from. Tell her they were sent by a friend who heard she was ill." When she is well again, you must tell her all about it, of course, and if she says you ought not to have asked for the things, tell her that I say you were quite right, and that I hope she will forgive me for taking the liberty of allowing myself a very great pleasure. The letter was signed G.P. something that the children couldn't read. I think we were right, said Phyllis. Right, of course we were, said Bobby. All the same, said Peter, with his hands in his pockets. I don't exactly look forward to telling Mother the whole truth of it. We're not to do it till she's well, said Bobby, and when she's well, we shall be so happy we shan't mind a little fuss like that. Oh, just look at the roses. I must take them up to her. And the sweetbriar, said Phyllis, sniffing it loudly. Don't forget the sweetbriar. As if I should, said Roberta. Mother told me the other day there was a thick hedge of it at her mother's house when she was a little girl. So that'll have lovely memories for her. And that's the last page of that chapter. And I shall read the next chapter very soon, but I need a drink of water. Do you? Actually, I'm going to have a mouthful of coffee first, while I still can. I can't drink coffee too late in the day, because I don't want it to stop me from being able to sleep at night. The coffee, that is. Lobotsky, if you're still here, the reason your posts keep disappearing is because we've got some very stringent filtering on the bots, by the bots, because this needs to be a family-friendly chat. Not that what you're saying is wrong, but the way the bot has been set up before I got it was fairly stringent. I'm not sure why. Sorry about that. I will look at adjusting the settings on it. That's better. So, thank you for being here. And as you have now discovered, I only chat in between chapters. Otherwise you lose the flow of the story. I try not to talk too much in between chapters when I'm explaining things like what people are doing or what a word means or something, because I'm probably a lot older than you are. And I grew up reading books that were a lot older than I am. And because I grew up reading them, and I also had them read to me by my parents and by my grandparents, who were a lot older than me, I actually learnt what a bunch of the different things mean that most people these days don't know without having to look it up in a dictionary. So while I'm reading, if there's something we come across like that, I will actually explain it if I think it's appropriate. If I think the story is going to the use of the word in the story will explain itself, then I won't bother explaining. You just have to wait and listen to, don't focus on the words that you don't know, but listen to the picture they're drawing, and you'll find often that you actually understand stuff that you didn't understand before because of the context. And that's, context means the way the words come together to create something. The setting of the words that are being used. So that's what that's about. I'm going to put what the link is for our Discord server if you are interested in joining it. You're welcome to, because sometimes people like to talk about the stories they've been listening to. Also, if you do any little doodling, sketching, drawing little pictures, if you enjoy drawing pictures when you're listening to a story, it's really cool if you share them with us too, if they're appropriate. If they're inappropriate, they'll get removed. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. As I say in my profile down below, one of my tags is family friendly, and I'd just like to keep it that way. So there's enough family unfriendly channels around that you can go and be family unfriendly elsewhere. I'm also putting up the link for our YouTube channel, so if you want to listen to other stories that we've read, that I've read on this channel, you can go over to YouTube. They stay live here for 2 weeks, and I save them, and then I transfer them across to YouTube, but without the overlay for all of the newer ones. So you don't see the chat or anything like that. You just got the video and me talking. But then I put them into playlists, and so you can actually listen to a story right from start to finish. There'll be me chatting in between and explaining things like this. But other than that, it's the story. So if you want to, you're most welcome to go over to YouTube and have a listen there. And if you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe, and then YouTube will tell you when I have put a new video up. And if you're here on Twitch and you're listening, and if you're new to Twitch, if you hit the little heart symbol that's below this video window, that means you'll be following me, and Twitch will tell you when I go live. So you'll be able to open up your open up the video stream and actually have a listen to a story that otherwise you would have missed. Okay, and of course you're welcome to listen to them when I'm not doing them live, when it's just the VOD, the video on demand, the recording. So I'm going to carry on reading the next chapter after I have another mouthful of water. So I shall carry on. We are reading The Railway Children by Edith Nesbit, E. Nesbit. I'm reading from a first generation iPad mini, which is still working for books. I can download public domain books to it and read them on it. I can't really do a lot else. It does go online, but apps can't be installed anymore. It's just too old for that. But the built-in book reader works fine, so that's great. And at some stage when I've been able to sort through boxes of books that I have, I will actually start reading from physical paper and card books, and I'll be able to show you the covers and the pictures and all that sort of stuff instead of having to find images online like that one over there for the cover of The Railway Children. So The Railway Children by E. Nesbit, Chapter 4, The Engine-burglar. Oh, that sounds a bit odd. The Engine-burglar. What was left of the second sheet and the Brunswick black came in very nicely to make a banner bearing the legend, "She is nearly well, thank you," that they put up for the old gentleman. And this was displayed to the Green Dragon about a fortnight after the arrival of the wonderful hamper. The old gentleman saw it and waved a cheerful response from the train, and when this had been done, the children saw that now was the time when they must tell mother what they had done when she was ill. And it did not seem nearly so easy as they had thought it would be, but it had to be done. And it was done. Mother was extremely angry. She was seldom angry, and now she was angrier than they had ever known her. This was horrible, but it was much worse when she suddenly began to cry. Crying is catching, I believe, like measles and whooping cough, and yawns, is my opinion. At any rate, everyone at once found himself taking part in a crying party. Mother stopped first. She dried her eyes, and then she said, "I am sorry I was so angry, darlings, because I know you didn't understand. We didn't mean to be naughty, Mummy," sobbed Bobby, and Peter and Phyllis sniffed. "Now listen," said Mother. "It's quite true that we're poor, but we have enough to live on. You mustn't go telling everyone about our affairs. It's not right, and you must never, never, never ask strangers to give you things. Now always remember that, won't you?" They all hugged her and rubbed their damp cheeks against hers and promised that they would. "And I'll write a letter to your old gentleman, and I shall tell him that I didn't approve. Oh, of course I shall thank him, too, for his kindness. It's you I don't approve of, my darlings, not the old gentleman. He was as kind as ever he could be, and you can give the letter to the station master to give him, and we won't say anything more about it." Afterwards, when the children were alone, Bobby said, "Isn't Mother splendid? You catch any other grown-up saying they were sorry they had been angry?" That's true. In the day and age that this was written in, it was not normal for adults to admit that they had made a mistake or apologise for things to children. "Yes," said Peter, "she is splendid, but it's rather awful when she's angry." "She's like avenging and bright in the song," said Phyllis. I should like to look at her if it wasn't so awful. She looks so beautiful when she's really downright furious. I think you'll find that the avenging and bright are references to an old church hymn. They took the letter down to the station master. I thought you said you hadn't got any friends except in London, said he. We've made him since, said Peter, but he doesn't live hereabouts. No, we just know him on the railway. Then the station master retired to that sacred inner temple behind the little window where the tickets are sold, and the children went down to the porter's room and talked to the porter. They learned several interesting things from him, among others that his name was Perks, and that he was married and had 3 children, that the lamps in front of engines are called headlights, and the ones at the back tail lights. And that just shows, whispered Phyllis, that trains really are dragons in disguise, with proper heads and tails. It was on this day that the children first noticed that all engines are not alike. I'm just going to open up Wikipedia and find out when this was written. Sorry, I have actually looked this up before. All engines are not alike. Alike, said the porter, whose name was Perks. Lor love you, no, miss. No more alike nor what you and me are. That little un without a tender as went by just now, all on her own. That was a tank, that was. She's off to do some shunting t'other side of Maidbridge. Tank engine. You might be familiar with Thomas the Tank Engine. And Thomas is quite a small engine, remember? And they're called a tank engine because they have tanks down each side of the boiler. Not Thomas the Tank, but Thomas the Tank Engine, because he's an engine. He's not a tank. Anyway, so there's one in here. That's as it might be you, miss. Then there's goods as it might be you, miss, as in small. Then there's goods engines, great strong things with 3 wheels on each side, joined with rods to strengthen them, as it might be me. Then there's mainline engines, as it might be this here young gentleman when he grows up and wins all the races at his school, so he will. The mainline engine, she's built for speed as well as power. That's one to the 9:15 up. In other words, that's the sort of train that is. The Green Dragon, said Phyllis. We calls her the Snail, miss, among ourselves, said the porter. She's oftener behind nor any train on the line, so she hasn't had to wait for another train, but she's still late. But the engine's green, said Phyllis. Yes, miss, said Perks. So's a snail some seasons of the year. The children agreed as they went home to dinner that the porter was most delightful company. I'm nearly there. I've found... Where is it? Oh, dear. I thought it would actually give me the link directly to the book because I've looked at it recently. The children agreed as they went home to dinner that the porter was most delightful company. Next day was Roberta's birthday, that's Bobby. In the afternoon she was politely but firmly requested to get out of the way and keep there till tea time. You aren't to see what we're going to do till it's done. It's a glorious surprise, said Phyllis. And Roberta went out into the garden all alone. She tried to be grateful, but she felt she would much rather have helped in whatever it was than have to spend her birthday afternoon by herself, no matter how glorious the surprise might be. Now that she was alone, she had time to think, and one of the things she thought of most was what Mother had said in one of those feverish nights when her hands were so hot and her eyes so bright. The words were, "Oh, what a doctor's bill there'll be for this." Yes, because the doctor has been doing home visits to help make her well. She walked round and round the garden among the rose bushes that hadn't any roses yet, only buds, so it's spring, and the lilac bushes and syringas and American currants, and the more she thought of the doctor's bill, the less she liked the thought of it. And presently she made up her mind. She went out through the side door of the garden and climbed up the steep field to where the road runs along by the canal. She walked along until she came to the bridge that crosses the canal and leads to the village. and here she waited. It was very pleasant in the sunshine to lean one's elbows on the warm stone of the bridge and look down at the blue water of the canal. Bobby had never seen any other canal except Regent's Canal, and the water of that was not at all a pretty colour. Regent's Canal is in the middle of London, and it's probably a little bit dirty. And at this time, when this was written, probably even dirtier than what we're used to. So I'm just going to type in here the Railway Children so I can look it up for you. I know I've looked at it recently. There it is. The book was written in 1905. So that's a long time ago. So that's why tail lights and headlights the children were amused by it. They don't associate them with cars because they didn't have cars then. They used a horse and coach or carriage or cart or anything else like that because they didn't travel so fast. And a lot of those were not necessarily used a lot in the day at night time. They were used in daytime. You didn't have to worry about them like on a cart. A coach, when it's travelling between towns that travels at night, that will have headlamps. But you don't see them lots like we see cars now. So the train having headlamps and tail lamps, or headlights and tail lights, actually is something that's a lot more direct in terms of what the children would understand and recognise and relate to now that they know about them, and the fact that they think of it as a dragon, so at the head of the dragon and the tail of the dragon. So I'm going to carry on. Bobby had never seen any other canal except the Regent's Canal, and the water of that is not at all a pretty colour, and she had never seen any river at all except the Thames, which also would be all the better if its face was washed. It's a rather muddy, dirty-looking river. I've seen it. Perhaps the children would have loved the canal as much as the railway, but for two things. One was that they had found the railway first, on that first wonderful morning when the house and the country and the moors and the rocks and great hills were all new to them. They had not found the canal till some days later. The other reason was that everyone on the railway had been kind to them, the station master, the porter, and the old gentleman who waved, and the people on the canal were anything but kind. The people on the canal were, of course, the bargees who steered the slow barges up and down, or walked beside the old horses that trampled up the mud of the towing path and strained at the long tow ropes. More explanation for you. When this was written, barges were used, horse-drawn barges were used to transport goods from out in the country into the city, or between cities, between towns and cities. So, like we would use a truck now, or a lorry if you're in England, that's the term they use. I can't remember what the Americans call it, whatever, it doesn't matter. Or trains, we use freight trains, but mainly trucks now. They used to use canal boats, barges, and you'd have someone who would drive it, steer it, and you'd have a horse that had a collar on and a harness and a rope that went back to the boat, the barge, behind them, and the horse would plod along slowly, just keeping on pulling. It's like pulling something heavy with a rope. It's hard to get it going, but once it gets going, if you just keep the pressure on it, it keeps moving. And so the horse would just plod along beside the canal on this track that was alongside the canal for pulling the canal boats, the barges. And that's called a tow path because that is the path that the horse tows the canal, the canal boat, the barge along by. Strained at the long tow ropes. So that's the big long rope that comes from the horse, because it needs to be far enough ahead. If it's too much alongside, then it won't be able to move the barge forwards. Peter had once asked one of the bargees the time, and had been told to get out of that, in a tone so fierce that he did not stop to say anything about his having just as much right on the towing path as the man himself. Indeed, he did not even think of saying it until some time later. Then another day, when the children thought they would like to fish in the canal, a boy in a barge threw lumps of coal at them, and one of these hit Phyllis on the back of the neck. She was just stooping down to tie up her bootlace, and thought though the coal hardly hurt at all, it made her not care very much about carrying on fishing. On the bridge, however, Roberta felt quite safe, because she could look down on the canal, and if any boy showed signs of meaning to throw coal, she could duck behind the parapet. Presently there was a sound of wheels, which was just what she expected. The wheels were the wheels of the doctor's dog cart. Now, a dog cart is a small cart drawn by a small horse. Not usually a dog. No, we don't have dogs strong enough for that. But because it's small enough for a dog, kind of. That's what they used to think of. The wheels were the wheels of the doctor's dog cart, and in the cart, of course, was the doctor. He pulled up and called out, "Hello, head nurse, want a lift?" "I want to see you," said Bobby. "Your mother's not worse, I hope," said the doctor. "No, but—" "Well, skip in then, and we'll go for a drive." Roberta climbed in, and the brown horse was made to turn around, which it did not like at all, because there's not a lot of room on there, and it was probably heading home. I should have just kept reading. Which it did not like at all, for it was looking forward to its tea. Its oats. "This is jolly," said Bobby, as the dog cart flew along the road by the canal. "You could throw a stone down any one of your three chimneys," said the doctor as they passed the house. "Yes," said Bobby, "but you'd have to be a jolly good shot." "How do you know I'm not?" said the doctor. "Now then, what's the trouble?" Bobby fidgeted with the hook of the driving apron. That's a cover that goes across the front, so you don't get dirt thrown up by the horse's hooves onto your clothing. The driving apron. "Come, out with it," said the doctor. "It's rather hard, you see," said Bobby, "to out with it, because of what Mother said." "What did Mother say?" "She said I wasn't to go telling everyone that we're poor, but you aren't everyone, are you?" "Not at all," said the doctor cheerfully. Well, I know doctors are very expensive, and Mrs. Vinnie told me that her doctoring only cost her 2pence a week because she belonged to a club." "Yes." "You see, she told me what a good doctor you were, and I asked her how she could afford you, because she's so much poorer than we are. I've been in her house, and I know. And then she told me about the club, and I thought I'd ask you. And, I don't want Mother to be worried. Can't we be in the club too, the same as Mrs. Vinnie?" The doctor was silent. He was rather poor himself, and he had been pleased at getting a new family to attend, so I think his feelings at that minute were rather mixed. I also don't think he realised how poor they were. "You aren't cross with me, are you?" said Bobby in a very small voice. The doctor roused himself. "Cross? How could I be? You're a very sensible little woman. Now look here, don't you worry. I'll make it all right with your mother, even if I have to make a special brand new club, all for her. Look here, this is where the aqueduct begins." What's its name?" asked Bobby. "A water bridge," said the doctor. "Look." The road rose to a bridge over the canal. To the left was a steep rocky cliff with trees and shrubs growing in the cracks of the rock, and the canal here left off running along the top of the hill and started to run on a bridge of its own, a great bridge with tall arches that went right across the valley. Bobby drew a long breath. "It is grand, isn't it?" she said. "It's like pictures in the history of Rome." "Right," said the doctor. "That's just exactly what it is like. The Romans were dead nuts on aqueducts. It's a splendid piece of engineering." "I thought engineering was making engines." "Ah, there are different sorts of engineering. Making roads and bridges and tunnels is one kind, and making fortifications is another. Well, we must be turning back. And remember, you aren't to worry about doctor's bills, or you'll be ill yourself, and then I'll send you a bill as long as the aqueduct." When Bobby had parted from the doctor at the top of the field that ran down from the road to Three Chimneys, she could not feel that she had done wrong. She knew that Mother would perhaps think differently, but Bobby felt that for once she was the one who was right, and she scrambled down the rocky slope with a really happy feeling. Phyllis and Peter met her at the back door. They were unnaturally clean and neat, and Phyllis had a red bow in her hair. There was only just time for Bobby to make herself tidy and tie up her hair with a blue bow before a little bell rang. "There," said Phyllis, "that's to show the surprise is ready. Now you wait till the bell rings again, and then you may come into the dining room." So Bobby waited. "Tinkle, tinkle," said the little bell, and Bobby went into the dining room, feeling rather shy. Directly she opened the door, she found herself, as it seemed, in a new world of light and flowers, and singing. Mother and Peter and Phyllis were standing in a row at the end of the table. The shutters were shut, and there were 12 candles on the table, one for each of Roberta's years. The table was covered with a sort of pattern of flowers, and at Roberta's place was a thick wreath of forget-me-nots and several most interesting little packages. And Mother and Phyllis and Peter were singing to the first part of the tune of St. Patrick's Day. Roberta knew that Mother had written the words on purpose for her birthday. It was a little way of Mother's on birthdays. It was something that Mother used to do on birthdays. It had begun on Bobby's 4th birthday, when Phyllis was a baby. Bobby remembered learning the verses to say to Father, "For a surprise." She wondered if Mother had remembered too. The 4-year-old verse had been, "Daddy dear, I'm only 4, and I'd rather not be more. 4's the nicest age to be, 2 and 2 and 1 and 3. What I love is 2 and 2, Mother, Peter, Phil, and you. What you love is 1 and 3, Mother, Peter, Phil, and me. Give your little girl a kiss because she learned and told you this." The song the others were singing now went like this, and I'm not going to sing it, I'm just going to recite it, okay? "Our darling Roberta, no sorrow shall hurt her, if we can prevent it her whole life long. Her birthday's our fete day." That's like a festival. "We'll make it our great day, and give her our presents, and sing her our song. May pleasures attend her, and may the fates send her the happiest journey along her life's way, with skies bright above her, and dear ones to love her. Dear Bob, many happy returns of the day." When they had finished singing, they cried, "3 cheers for our Bobby," and gave them very loudly. Bobby felt exactly as though she were going to cry. You know, that odd feeling in the bridge of your nose and the pricking in your eyelids. But before she had time to begin, they were all kissing and hugging her. "Now," said Mother, "look at your presents." They were very nice presents. There was a green and red needlebook that Phyllis had made herself in secret moments. There was a darling little silver brooch of Mother's, shaped like a buttercup, which Bobby had known and loved for years, but which she had never thought would come to be her very own. There was also a pair of blue glass vases from Mrs. Vinnie. Roberta had seen and admired them in the village shop, and there were 3 birthday cards with pretty pictures and wishes. Mother fitted the forget-me-not crown on Bobby's brown head. "And now, look at the table," she said. There was a cake on the table covered with white sugar, with "Dear Bobby" on it in pink sweets. And there were buns and jam, but the nicest thing was that the big table was almost covered with flowers. Wallflowers were laid all round the tea tray. There was a ring of forget-me-nots round each plate. The cake had a wreath of white lilac around it, and in the middle was something that looked like a pattern, all done with single blooms of lilac or wallflower or laburnum. "It's a map of the railway," cried Peter. "Look, those lilac lines are the metals, and there's the station done in brown wallflowers. The laburnum is the train, and there are the signal boxes and the road up to here, and those fat red daisies are us 3 waving to the old gentleman. That's him, the pansy in the laburnum train. And there's 3 chimneys done in the purple primroses," said Phyllis, "and that little tiny rosebud is Mother looking out for us when we're late for tea. Peter invented it all, and we got all the flowers from the station. We thought you'd like it better." "That's my present," said Peter, suddenly dumping down his adored steam engine on the table in front of her. Its tender had been lined with fresh white paper and was full of sweets. "Oh, Peter," cried Bobby, quite overcome by this munificence. "Not your own dear little engine that you're so fond of?" "Oh, no," said Peter very promptly, "not the engine, only the sweets." So the engine was the container. Bobby couldn't help her face changing a little, not so much because she was disappointed at not getting the engine, as because she had thought it so very noble of Peter, and now she felt she had been silly to think it. Also, she felt she must have seemed greedy to expect the engine as well as the sweets. So her face changed. Peter saw it. He hesitated a minute. Then his face changed too, and he said, "I mean not all the engine. I'll let you go halves if you like." "You're a brick," cried Bobby. "It's a splendid present." She said no more aloud, but to herself said, "That was awfully jolly decent of Peter, because I know he didn't mean to. Well, the broken half shall be my half of the engine, and I'll get it mended and give it back to Peter for his birthday. And, yes, mother dear, I should like to cut the cake," she added, and tea began, because the other half was thinking it. It was a delightful birthday. After tea, Mother played games with them, any game they liked, and of course their first choice was Blind Man's Buff, in the course of which Bobby's forget-me-not wreath twisted itself crookedly over one of her ears and stayed there. Then, when it was near bedtime and time to calm down, Mother had a lovely new story to read to them. "You won't sit up late working, will you, Mother?" Bobby asked as they said good night, and Mother said no, she wouldn't. She would only just write to Father and then go to bed. But when Bobby crept down later to bring up her presents, for she felt she really could not be separated from them all night, Mother was not writing, but leaning her head on her arms, and her arms on the table. I think it was rather good of Bobby to slip quietly away, saying over and over, "She doesn't want me to know she's unhappy. And I won't know, but it made a sad end to the birthday. The very next morning Bobby began to watch her opportunity to get Peter's engine mended secretly. And the opportunity came the very next afternoon. Mother went by train to the nearest town to do shopping. When she went there, she always went to the post office, perhaps to post her letters to Father, for she never gave them to the children, or Mrs. Vinnie to post, and she never went to the village herself. Peter and Phyllis went with her. Bobby wanted an excuse not to go, but try as she would, she couldn't think of a good one. And just when she felt that all was lost, her frock caught on a big nail by the kitchen door, and there was a great criss-cross tear all along the front of the skirt. I assure you this was really an accident, so the others pitied her and went without her. For there was no time for her to change, because they were already rather late and had to hurry to the station to catch the train. When they had gone, Bobby put on her everyday frock and went down to the railway. Excuse me, I just need to take a mouthful of water. When they had gone, Bobby put on her everyday frock and went down to the railway. She did not go into the station, but she went along the line to the end of the platform where the engine is when the down train is alongside the platform, the place where there are a water tank and a long limp leather hose like an elephant's trunk. She hid behind a bush on the other side of the railway. She had the toy engine done up in brown paper, and she waited patiently with it under her arm. Then when the next train came in and stopped, Bobby went across the metals of the up line and stood beside the engine. She had never been so close to an engine before. It looked much larger and harder than she expected, and it made her feel very small indeed, and somehow very soft, as if she could very, very easily be hurt rather badly. "I know what silkworms feel like now," said Bobby to herself. The engine driver and fireman did not see her. They were leaning out on the other side, telling the porter a tale about a dog and a leg of mutton. "If you please," said Roberta, but the engine was blowing off steam and no one heard her. "If you please, Mr. Engineer," she spoke a little louder, but the engine happened to speak at the same moment, and of course Roberta's soft little voice hadn't a chance. It seemed to her that the only way would be to climb onto the engine and pull at their coats. The step was high, but she got her knee on it and clambered into the cab. She stumbled and fell on her hands and knees on the base of the great heap of coals that led up to the square opening in the tender. The engine was not above the weakness of its fellows. It was making a great deal more noise than there was the slightest need for. And just as Roberta fell on the coals, the engine driver, who had turned without seeing her, started the engine. And when Bobby had picked herself up, the train was moving. Not fast, but much too fast for her to get off. All sorts of dreadful thoughts came to her all together in one horrible flash. There were such things as express trains that went on, she supposed, for hundreds of miles without stopping. Suppose this should be one of them. How would she get home again? She had no money to pay for the return journey. And I've no business to be here. I'm an engine burglar, that's what I am, she thought. I shouldn't wonder if they could lock me up for this. And the train was going faster and faster. There was something in her throat that made it impossible for her to speak. She tried twice. The men had their backs to her. They were doing something to things that looked like taps. They're the controls for the engine. Suddenly she put out her hand and caught hold of the nearest sleeve. The man turned with a start, and he and Roberta stood for a minute, looking at each other in silence. Then the silence was broken by them both. The man said, "Here's a bloomin' go!" and Roberta burst into tears. The other man said he was blooming well blessed, or something like it, but though naturally surprised, they were not exactly unkind. "You're a naughty little girl, that's what you are," said the fireman, and the engine driver said, "Daring little piece, I call her," but they made her sit down on an iron seat in the cab and told her to stop crying and tell them what she meant by it. She did stop as soon as she could. One thing that helped her was the thought that Peter would give almost his ears to be in her place, on a real engine, really going. The children had often wondered whether any engine driver could be found noble enough to take them for a ride on an engine, and now there she was. She dried her eyes and sniffed earnestly. "Now then," said the fireman, "out with it. What do you mean by it, eh?" "Oh, please," said Bobby. "Try again," said the engine driver encouragingly. Bobby tried again. "Please, Mr. Engineer," she said, "I did call out to you from the line, but you didn't hear me, and I just climbed up to touch you on the arm, quite gently I meant to do it, and I fell into the coals, and I am so sorry if I frightened you. Oh, please don't be cross. Oh, please don't." She sniffed again. "We ain't so much cross," said the fireman, "as interested like. It ain't every day a little girl tumbles into our coal bunker out of the sky, is it, Bill? What did you do it for, eh?" "That's the point," agreed the engine driver. "What did you do it for?" Bobby found that she had not quite stopped crying. The engine driver patted her on the back and said, "Here, cheer up, mate. It ain't so bad as all that here, I'll be bound." "I wanted," said Bobby, much cheered to find herself addressed as mate, "I only wanted to ask if you'd be so kind as to mend this." She picked up the brown paper parcel from among the coals and undid the string with hot, red fingers that trembled. Her feet and legs felt the scorch of the engine fire, but her shoulders felt the wild, chill rush of the air. The engine lurched and shook and rattled, and as they shot under a bridge, the engine seemed to shout in her ears. The fireman shovelled on coals. Bobby unrolled the brown paper and disclosed the toy engine. "I thought," she said wistfully, "that perhaps you'd mend this for me because you're an engineer, you know." The engine driver said he was blowed if he wasn't blessed. "I'm blessed if I ain't blowed," remarked the fireman, but the engine driver took the little engine and looked at it, and the fireman ceased for an instant to shovel coal and looked too. "It's like your precious cheek," said the engine driver. Whatever made you think It's like your precious cheek. Whatever made you think we'd be bothered tinkering penny toys?" "I didn't mean it for precious cheek," said Bobby. "Only everyone that has anything to do with railways is so kind and good. I didn't think you'd mind. You don't really, do you?" she asked, for she had seen a not unkindly wink pass between the two. "My trade's driving an engine, not mending her, especially such a hout-sized an engine's Such outsized in engines as this here, said Bill, and how as we are going to get you back to your sorrowing friends and relations and all, be forgiven and forgotten. If you'll put me down next time you stop, said Bobby firmly, though her heart beat fiercely against her arm as she clasped her hands, and lend me the money for a third-class ticket. I'll pay you back. Honour bright. I'm not a confidence trick like in the newspapers. Really, I'm not. You're a little lady, every inch, said Bill, relenting suddenly and completely. We'll see you gets home safe. And about this engine, Jim, ain't you got near a power as can use a soldering iron? Seems to me as that's about all the little bounder wants doing to it. That's what father said, Bobby explained eagerly. What's that for? She pointed to a little brass wheel that he had turned as he spoke. That's the injector. In what? Injector, to fill up the boiler. Oh, said Bobby, mentally registering the fact to tell the others. That is interesting. This here's the automatic brake, Bill went on, flattered by her enthusiasm. You just move this here little handle. Do it with one finger. You can, and the train jolly soon stops. That's what they call the power of science in the newspapers. He showed her two little dials like clock faces and told her how one showed how much steam was going and the other showed if the brake was working properly. By the time she had seen him shut off steam with a big shining steel handle, Bobby knew more about the inside working of an engine than she had ever thought there was to know. And Jim had promised that his second cousin's wife's brother should solder the toy engine, or Jim would know the reason why. Besides all the knowledge she had gained, Bobby felt that she and Bill and Jim were now friends for life, and that they had wholly and forever forgiven her for stumbling uninvited among the sacred coals of their tender. At Stacklepool Junction, she parted from them with warm expressions of mutual regard. They handed her over to the guard of a returning train, a friend of theirs, and she had the joy of knowing what guards do and their secret fastnesses. That's their secret spaces. And understood how, when you pull the communication cord in railway carriages, a wheel goes round under the guard's nose and a loud bell rings in his ears. She asked the guard why his van smelt so fishy, and learned that he had to carry a lot of fish every day, and that the wetness in the hollows of the corrugated floor had all drained out of boxes full of plaice and cod and mackerel and soles and smelts. They're all types of English fish. Bobby got home in time for tea, and she felt as though her mind would burst with all that had been put into it since she had parted from the others. How she blessed the nail that had torn her frock. "Where have you been?" asked the others. "To the station, of course," said Roberta, but she would not tell a word of her adventures till the day appointed when she mysteriously led them to the station at the hour of the 3:19's transit and proudly introduced them to her friends, Bill and Jim. Jim's second cousin's wife's brother had not been unworthy of the sacred trust reposed in him. The toy engine was literally as good as new. "Goodbye, oh goodbye," said Bobby, just before the engine screamed its goodbye. "I shall always, always love you, and Jim's second cousin's wife's brother as well." And as the three children went home up the hill, Peter hugging the engine, now quite its own self again, Bobby told with joyous leaps of the heart the story of how she had been an engine burglar. And that's the end of that chapter and today's story time. And we shall read more next time, which for me here in New Zealand will probably be Monday at 3 p.m, unless something happens, which means I can't. So there you go. And what are you going to get up to with the rest of your day? Do you have the rest of your day, or are you already about to go to sleep for the night? Oh, so, and have you been drawing pictures while you're listening? It's a good way to pass the time to keep your hands busy when your ears and your mind are listening to a story, so that the rest of your body can stay still long enough for you to listen properly. Don't forget the links down below, and also in the chat if you've been here long enough, the links down below so you can go and join our Discord server, and you can tell others about it if you want to, about listening to stories. And you can also go over to YouTube and listen to stories that we've already had before. We've just finished 2 books by another author called George MacDonald. He was a Scottish gentleman who wrote Victorian fantasy stories. He was asked once upon a time if it was a fairy story, one of the books, and he said no, because there are no fairies in it. So it's a fantasy story, and he wrote during the Victorian era. And so that's in the 1800s, not even the 1900s, whereas this one's written at the beginning of the 1900s. So you can listen to that. The first one has completed being loaded up on YouTube, and the next one is starting to go up now while we're reading this one here. And they are The Princess and the Goblin and The Princess and Curdie. They're quite intriguing. They're quite different to modern fairy stories. So there you go. We shall see you again next time. Bye. Have a wonderful week.